All right, guys, here we go. We're going to get into some graphing. So we're going to be looking at 11-8 phase shifts and vertical translations. So we're going to get into the graphing of our sine functions a little bit more right now. So if we're going to learn how to apply phase shifts and apply vertical translations and to create a new midline. So we'll talk about the idea of the midline. So through this up here, right here for you guys, here's our A with our amplitude. I'll step back and you guys can pause it and write it down if you want so you can listen. 1, 2, 3. And then our trig function, the trig function can be either sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, whatever we're working with. Don't forget B, it either shrinks the period or expands the period. Our phase shift is what we're doing that's new. We're looking at H is our phase shift, and I'll show you how to find that. And then here's our new piece here, which is called the vertical translation, and that's the K on the end. So we call that our midline. So we'll kind of work with that here in a little bit. So let's just take y equals sine of theta minus 90. So let's write in our things that we have here. So we know that A is right here, and it's imaginary. So we know that A is equal to 1. So if there's nothing in front, it'll be a 1. We know that our B is imaginary, and that's equal to 1. So our B is equal to 1. And then we need to find our phase shift. And so our phase shift is going to be 90 degrees. So it's going to be 90. So if we look at this, our H is 90 degrees. So it's always the opposite of what's in here, all right? So you could set this equal to 0 to find it. So if you want to find H, you would just say that my brain just went dead. You could set it equal to 0 like this, and that means theta had a 90 degree phase shift. So that's how you set it equal to 0. You could find it by adding 0. So it's always going to be the opposite. So H is 90. And then there's nothing out there for K. So we're going to get a plus 0. So my midline is at 0. So this thing didn't move up or down. So let's graph this thing. All right, so what do we mean by a phase shift? A phase shift moves left or right. So if we're going to move left or right, this says it moved 90 degrees to the right. So if we're here, we normally start at 0, but it said it moved 90 degrees. So we're over here at 90 degrees. And that means if we normally were at 360, this moved 90 degrees to 450 degrees. So I added 90 degrees. So all of these points move. So my starting point was here. This is my starting point. It used to be at 0 and 0, but we moved it to the right 90 degrees. So now we can take all our points that we've had before, where we know a sine graph, our sine graph looks like this from our other lectures. And we're going to put our first starting point here. The amplitude is 1. The second one is back at 0. The third one's at -1. And now, oops, wrong spot. I messed up. Is here. That's because all the points moved 90 degrees, because it said move it 90 degrees. Our phase shift was 90 degrees. So if I real lightly draw a dot of our regular sine graph, our dotted line looks like that. And so this point here moved 90 degrees. This point here moved 90 degrees. This point here moved 90 degrees. The point that was here moved 90 degrees. So that everything was moving 90 degrees. This point here moved 90 degrees. The final point, 360, moved 90 degrees. So you could add 90 degrees to all the points when it's a phase shift, depending on what phase shift you're working with. So all we're doing is moving this graph left and right with a phase shift. All right, so let's look at what I do with my eraser. There's one right here. Let's look at one here. Let's do one real quick. Oops, where'd my book go? There it is. Here we go, guys. You can fast forward a little bit. So let's look at our phase shift here. And let's do 2 sine. Let's do 2 cosine theta plus 20 degrees. All right, so let's look at that one here. So our amplitude is equal to 2. My b, nothing there, is equal to 1, so it doesn't change the width, so the period's going to stay at 360. My h is going to be negative 20. It's the opposite. So if I take theta and I set it equal to 0, my phase shift is going to be negative 20 degrees. So that means I'm going to move negative 20 degrees. So let's go ahead and draw our graph here. We have degrees. And we know our original is at 90 degrees, 180, 270, 360. We know our b is 1, so our period is still 360 over 1, so 360 degrees, so it's still going to be that long. But I need to move all of these to the left 20 degrees. So if I subtract 20, I get 70. Subtract 20, I get 160. Subtract 20, I get 250. Subtract 20, I get 340. So the red are my new ones, 70, 160, 250, 340. Well, what about 0? Well, we're just going to extend this line this way, and we're going to say it starts at negative 20. So the starting point of cosine is up, but my amplitude is 2. So I'm going to go up to 2 to my starting point, and then back down to 0, then down to 2, then up to 0, and then back up to 2. So my graph is the same graph that's a little taller with the same period, 360 degrees. The period is 360 degrees, because if I go, my x2 minus x1 is 340 minus a negative 20, which is 360 degrees. So my phase shift went to the left. My amplitude is 2 from the midline. So this goes up 2, this goes down 2, and we redraw the graph. So that's how you guys do phase shifts. All right, so let's tackle the phase shift and the midline here. Phase shift and the midlines. So you guys could do, that's a horrible example that they gave you guys. All right, so let's do this one. So now we get y equals 1/2 cosine theta minus, what they put there? Minus 2. All right, so 1/2 theta minus 2. So let's write our pieces in here. This is on the outside, so that's literally, there's a parentheses right there. So on the other, phase shift has to be inside the parentheses, so you might want to make a note of that. So let's look at this. We have A is equal to 1/2. B is still equal to 1, so that means my period is going to be 360 over 1, so it's still 360 degrees. Okay? My H, there is no H inside the parentheses, so no phase shift. And then my K is going to be -2. That means my midline is -2. So let's draw what that looks like. So we're going to go this way. And we have no phase shift, so we can go 360, 180, 90, 270. All right, now we're going to draw this one first. So my midline, the middle of the graph, is going to go all the way down to -2. So K equals -2. So I'm going to put this dotted line right here for you guys to see this. Okay, now my amplitude is 1/2 from the midline. So make sure you understand that. My amplitude always comes off the midline. So I'm going to go up to right here. So if this is -1, I'm going to go right here. That's going to be my maximum point. And I'm going to go down 1/2. And that's going to be my minimum point. And so the shape of the cosine graph starts up, goes to the midline, down to the bottom, minimum, up to the midline, and over to here. So it still has the same shape. The distance from the midline up is 1/2. So that's my amplitude. I made it too small. That's 1/2. And the distance from here to here is 1/2. That's what they mean by midline. Let's do another one so you guys can see it a little bit better. All right. So let's just do something a little bit bigger. Let's do y equals the sine 3 sine of theta plus 2. All right, so here's my midline. Here's my amplitude. So I got my amplitude is equal to 3. My midline is equal to 2. My B is equal to 1. That means the period is still 360 degrees. And I'm going to put PS for phase shift. Phase shift, that's going to equal 0. So that's my H. My H is 0. Didn't go anywhere. So let's draw my line here. Period still 360. 360, 180, 90, 270. 90, 270, oops, 180, 270. All right, so now my phase shift, I'll do it in red. I'm sorry, yeah, my vertical translation, it goes up to 2. Now my midline's at 2, right here. So I have this midline that goes across like this. That's the middle of my graph. From there, I know I'm going to go up 3. So I'm going to go, let me do it in a different color here. Let's do it in green. I'm going to go up 3 to 5. So that's my maximum height. And I'm going to go down 3 to -1. That's my minimum height. Because my amplitude is 3. So that's my amplitude of 3. That's my amplitude of 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. Now, it's a sine graph. The sine graph starts at 0, goes up to the maximum, back to the midline, down to the minimum, back to the midline. So, sine graphs: midline, maximum, midline, minimum, midline. Okay? All right, guys. That's how you do phase shifts. We'll see you soon. Good luck. I'll leave that up there.